Sometimes we just have to explore death and the darker things in life in order to appreciate it more. Last year, I began my podcast series, Jade Explains Death, and for season 2, I've decided to bring it to life as a docuseries. One moment, Brittany Murphy was an unstoppable force, and the next, she just seemed to be fading away. We know what caused her death, but do we know exactly how she arrived there? And what a coincidence is it that her husband died of the same exact thing months later? Come along on this journey with me as we analyze the domino effect that led to her untimely death. Through exploring her life, death, and autopsy report, we may just arrive at some answers to this maddening mystery. Brittany Murphy's death is one of the most mysterious and bizarre celebrity deaths I've ever come across. We know how she died, but it still feels unresolved because the circumstances are murky and a little shady. There are twists and turns and strange characters involved. It feels very reminiscent of a film she would have loved to act in. There is so much to love about Brittany Murphy. She was an absolute natural at her craft. I personally always felt like she was very real. She fell victim to insecurities just like the rest of us. She was vivacious and infectious. She had this way of making people wish that she was their real-life best friend. Towards the end of her career and life, her reputation became muddled by her strange behavior and appearance. But there was so much more going on behind the scenes. In order to understand and start piecing together this strange mystery, we must get to know a little bit about her childhood. When Brittany was only 2 years old, her parents got a divorce. Her father basically fled from her life entirely. In fact, he wasn't even listed on her death certificate because he really wasn't a father to her at all. It appears that he tried to resurface in her life later on, but only after she obtained success in the film industry. So it's hard to know if it was genuine. Her mother, Sharon, was left as a single mother, but according to Brittany, she sacrificed a lot for her daughter. She did everything in her power to encourage her creativity and even sold her belongings in order to move her daughter out to LA to pursue her acting career. Prior to that, Sharon worked really hard to pay for schooling, where Brittany was able to study dance, theater, and singing. Brittany knew early on exactly what she wanted to do in life, and Sharon really hustled to help make it happen. Brittany and Sharon remained close throughout her life. The two lived together even after the starlet married. Regardless of her mother's love and affection, it was still trying for Brittany to never have a father figure. It left a big hole inside of her, a hole that she likely later tried to fill through her romantic relationships, a story as old as time. I personally believe that this was a factor in her falling for her husband, Simon, the man who was front and center in her death. After moving to LA, Brittany landed a few roles in television, which included the shows Drexel's Class and Almost Home. 2 years after kicking off her career, she landed her breakthrough role in the cult classic Clueless. I loved her in that. Her character easily stole the show, making many fall in love with her. Next came the film Freeway alongside Reese Witherspoon, and soon the blockbuster Girl Interrupted and the dark comedy Drop Dead Gorgeous. What some don't know is that Brittany also worked in the music industry, and she had a beautiful voice. She started off with projects where she could remain anonymous and get her feet wet. She sang on a few well-known tracks, and the lead vocalists never knew who was offering up their voice. Later on, she did a song called Faster Kill Pussycat, which happened to be one of my club favorites. Throughout her career, she was unlucky in love and had a few failed engagements. Her friends described her as always ready to find the one and settle down. She craved the stability of a serious relationship and marriage. Cue Simon. It's unclear exactly when Brittany met Simon Monjack, but in April of 2007, the pair married. Around this time, Brittany began to change before her friends' eyes. He was old enough to be her father, and watching the two alongside one another just felt off. They were an odd couple. It's my theory that Brittany was so ready to settle down and saw a person who could potentially fill that fatherless void that she jumped into the relationship. It is devastating to know that she had hoped for a stable, loving man, but ended up with him. In an interview, Simon actually admitted to falling in love with Brittany long before meeting her. I mean, when she was still a teenager. He also claimed that he was very patient and basically waited for her to grow up. But was he really? Because during this so-called waiting period, he was a busy boy. He took part in several relationships, and his exes have plenty to say about him. One woman who he proposed to was simply ghosted by him. And this was because Simon lied about having cancer and conned his mother out of a huge chunk of money and was caught. She was in contact with Simon's mother because she was worried about him. They had spent every moment together and she knew he was sick. But his mother informed her that she had hired a private investigator who had been tailing her son. He never actually had cancer. He hadn't been going to the appointments he claimed to need the money for. He was just going out all over town and spending money he swindled as he saw fit. A couple of his exes also painted a more sinister picture of Simon. According to them, he had a fierce temper and was possessive and controlling. He also fit a lot of jabs in about the women's weight. He would say things like, "Oh honey, I don't think you should wear that. It's not the most flattering for your body type," or "You might want to think more about your diet. It will make you feel better and you will look better in your outfits," or "Are you sure you want to eat that much?" Great guy, right? But that's not all. Simon was pathological. He has a criminal history. He also has been involved in some very shady business dealings. In fact, he gained a nickname with former partners, both business and romantic, as Monjack. In 2005, several warrants were put out in his name for credit card fraud and theft. He got lucky, though, and the charges were never pursued further, not because he was believed to be innocent, but because of lack of evidence. Just a few months before marrying Brittany, he was jailed for 9 days and faced possible deportation due to overstaying his visa and lying. According to Brittany's friends, Simon explained his 9-day stint by faking a kidnapping. She even allegedly paid a ransom for a safe return, but keep in mind that this story cannot be verified and is based on talk. He misrepresented himself to the women in his life as a brilliant and successful screenwriter, when in reality, his work was underwhelming, to say the least. It did not produce and was known by very few. He did not make a livable amount of income off of his work. After marrying Brittany, he seemed to abandon writing altogether so that he could dedicate his time exclusively to becoming her manager, makeup artist, and handler. This is when things began rolling downhill for Brittany. On the few occasions when she was spotted on the red carpet or out at events, people noticed that her size was dwindling. Brittany had always been small-framed, but it was reaching an alarming stage. Her backbones were protruding out of her skin. Her face appeared gaunt. Additionally, she often seemed dazed and down. Soon she began slurring her words or wandering off topic in conversation. One friend basically described her as looking as if the lights were on, but nobody was home. Eventually, she stopped booking jobs. The only callbacks came from small-budgeted independent films. This was largely due to her husband's disruptive behavior on set. He didn't allow people to just do their job. He had to micromanage everything, from her lines to her wardrobe and makeup. And he had no business doing her makeup. He was horrible at it. He made unrealistic demands for treatment and food that were just not in the movie's budget. He threw Whopper-sized temper tantrums and threatened to march her right off set. Eventually, directors got so fed up that they would call his bluff. He would backtrack some of the time. He would calm down some of the time. Other times, he would just get her fired. The director and producer would replace Brittany with a different actress. Brittany's closest friends no longer had a working phone number for the starlet. They had no way of contacting her. All calls, emails, and inquiries had to go through him. People were worried, rightfully so. There were signs of a potentially abusive situation, and Brittany also exhibited signs that she was becoming dependent on drugs. She was never big in the Hollywood party scene. She wasn't known to overindulge in alcohol or dabble in drugs. Simon had an alleged history with drugs. Many people believe that he was simply pushing drugs on her to keep her compliant or from getting suspicious, because he was secretly blowing through her money. He would spend exorbitant amounts at a time, even going so far as to buy fake jewelry pieces to bring home. He convinced both Brittany and Sharon that jewelry was the best investment you could make. So when money was disappearing, they believed it was being used for these investments. This is what makes me so sad about the whole situation. Brittany was the one who had to experience all of the negative. She had to deal with the press writing hurtful things about her. She had to deal with her tarnished reputation and the past judgment. She had to deal with getting fired and no longer booking any jobs. Can you imagine what toll that would take on a person who may already be very insecure? At this time, Simon got off scot-free. He wasn't really discussed much in the media, not until her death. Some may wonder, well, how did she allow all of this to happen? One thing to try and understand is that if she was in an abusive relationship, well, That is a total mindfuck. Until you experience such a thing, it may be hard to grasp how a person can stay in a situation like that, and I hope that you never ever do. On top of that, if she were heavily medicated, that would make it far more difficult to be able to stand back and see all of the red flags and pieces of the puzzle. There's a reason why drugs are used in trafficking crimes. They get people hooked and dependent on drugs. It makes people easier to control. And though Brittany's situation was not that, it could have just been another tool of control. After she died, Simon admitted in an interview that Brittany didn't feel right in her home. Something about it made her feel uneasy. It was Britney Spears' former home, and there have been rumors of paranormal activity, but I personally believe that this may have run deeper. It's possible, and I'm just speculating here, that she was in a bad state and she felt it. Abuse can wreak havoc on a person, and they may not even recognize it. I have been in a toxic situation personally, and my home made me feel ill. It made me uneasy. I hated being there. I worked long shifts and I pulled doubles. I went weeks without a day off. It is possible that she felt uneasy about her home because it was not her happy place anymore. It's possible that a part of her was pulling herself away from the situation, but she just couldn't quite put her finger on it. Sadly, that pull just wasn't strong enough. At around 8 a.m. on December 20th, 2009, the LA Fire Department responded to a call at her home. They found her collapsed in her bathroom. Just before she collapsed, she told her mother that she didn't feel good and was dying. She went inside of her bathroom, and yet nobody found her lifeless body for another 30 minutes. She had been unwell in the weeks leading up to that moment. The household was passing around a respiratory bug, but Brittany was hit the hardest. She was struggling with severe abdominal pain, a cough, fever, and shortness of breath. On the morning of her death, she was extremely dizzy and could obviously feel herself shutting down. I will never be able to understand why it took so long for her body to be found after giving her mother such an ominous warning. She was rushed to the hospital where doctors and EMTs tried everything that they could to bring her back. Sadly, nothing worked. She was pronounced dead at 10:04 a.m. Next, we are going to take a look at her autopsy report. But first, let me just tell you about some claims made by Simon and Brittany's mother after she died. The duo both claimed that Brittany actually died as a result of a known heart condition called mitral valve prolapse. They also claim that Brittany never used any kind of drug. I'm not sure if they made these claims because they felt that the public would never be informed of her actual cause of death, or because they felt that the masses were just too unsophisticated to understand an autopsy report, because her examination showed exactly what both of these claims were: lies. There is no mention of mitral valve prolapse in her autopsy report. There is mention of a history of diabetes. It doesn't mean that she didn't suffer from the condition, but if she did, it played zero role in her death.
You're saying she was not using any of those medications?
I'm saying that she used Vicoprofen for her menstrual time, and at that same time she would have Seraphim, which is an antidepressant, for 5 days a month.
Let me ask you about rumors of cocaine use.
She was diagnosed with a heart murmur when she was a young teenager, and she was terrified of anything happening. She never did any drugs, ever.
Petechial hemorrhages were present on her lungs. This causes a discoloration that is sometimes speckled or in a web-like pattern and is often red. This is caused by surface blood vessels rupturing. It can be due to a number of things, but some of the biggest are asphyxiation, infection, or disease. Both of her lung lobes revealed moderate to severe edema or fluid buildup. They were both more obviously dense near the bottom. Sections of the tissue from the bottom of each lobe sank in water. This is an indication that the tissue is diseased. Also, a blood culture came back positive for bacteria. In short, she had severe pneumonia. She also had systemic lymphadenopathy. This means that her lymph nodes all over her body were swollen. Because infection was present at such a high degree, they were reactive, meaning the swelling was in reaction to the infection. While she was still at the hospital, an additional blood test revealed late-stage hypochromic microcytic anemia. This condition was likely due to malnutrition, where she wasn't getting nearly enough iron. Infections can also worsen this condition. This impedes the ability of red blood cells to transport oxygen to organs. Based on her examination, her kidneys were already getting sick from lack of oxygen. If left untreated for too long, it can cause organ failure. Her autopsy also made note of decreased blood volume. Since no source of an internal bleed was found, this also points to severe anemia. In addition to all of that, toxicology found a multiple drug intoxication. This means that it wasn't just one drug found at a lethal level, but multiple drugs found at such a high level that it could create a potentially lethal circumstances. She had high levels of multiple types of cold medications, hydrocodone, which is a strong narcotic painkiller, Tylenol, and L-methamphetamine, which is found in ADHD medication. Hydrocodone also contains Tylenol or acetaminophen, so she was basically doubling up on that. Her cause of death is pneumonia and anemia, with multiple drug intoxication a contributing factor. So this shoots her mom and husband's claims completely to hell. The report also makes note of dozens of pill bottles found on scene. Many of them were found next to her bed, and they had various names on the bottle. Some had Brittany's name, some had her mother's, and some had Simon's. Oddly, they were all clustered together next to the bed where her mother did not sleep at the time. The aftermath. After Brittany's untimely death, things stayed strange and Simon appeared to stay shady. With Sharon's help, he crafted the Brittany Murphy Foundation. Invitations were sent out in large batches requesting donations up to $10,000 in exchange for a ticket to the launch event. What many found so startling about these invitations was that it made it clear that this foundation launch event was actually a memorial for Brittany. So basically, he was selling tickets to her memorial at $10,000 a pop. People were suspicious immediately. By this time, many of Simon's failed past business dealings had come to light. He was being portrayed as a con artist. Those people weren't wrong. The foundation wasn't registered. The state of California had no record of it at all. Once this came to the surface, the foundation announced that they would be canceling the event and refunding the donations. But it is unclear whether or not they actually returned the money. Sharon and Simon also made an appearance on the Larry King Live show. They were hoping to clear up some of the so-called rumors that were circulating, but really, they only inflamed them. I found the interaction between the pair disturbing. There were a couple of points in the interview where Simon called Sharon baby, and it kind of made my skin crawl. Simon also admitted openly that he didn't wish to have an autopsy performed on Brittany. This was later confirmed by one of the responding investigators. That wasn't the only strange media appearance that Simon made. He basically went on a media tour. At one point, he welcomed a journalist into the home that he once shared with Brittany. His demeanor was bizarre. He proceeded to show off Brittany's wardrobe and appeared giddy like a schoolgirl. He also gave her a tour of the bathroom where Brittany collapsed. Many of her toiletries were still present. That reporter later stated that she felt very uneasy around Simon and that something struck her as being off. But nothing can top the strangeness that occurred on May 23, 2010. A second 911 call was placed from inside of the home. It was Sharon calling to report that her son-in-law was unresponsive in their bed. Yes, their bed. Sharon told investigators that she in fact shared the bed with Simon after her daughter's death, the same bed that Simon shared with her daughter. Simon was dead, and he did have an autopsy performed because he wasn't around to contest it. It was eerily similar to Brittany's. His cause of death was also pneumonia and anemia. This left the masses, including me, baffled. How could this be? It has been just way too much for many to accept this as a coincidence, which it very well could be. Theories of poisoning, mold, and Munchausen's ran rampant. Cue Brittany's absentee father. Brittany's father decided to take it upon himself to do his own investigation. He just couldn't accept that Brittany's death was anything but homicide. I don't know if this was provoked by his deep love for his daughter or a desire to be in the limelight or in hopes of gaining money in some way. His investigations rendered very little. He clung on to the tidbit that high levels of heavy metals were found in strands of Brittany's hair. Truth is, Brittany didn't exhibit any telltale signs of heavy metal poisoning. My own strands of hair would likely have similar results. I color treat my hair often. There are heavy metals found in many hair dyes, and that stuff sticks around. Heavy metal poisoning almost always presents with an abnormality found in the nails. There are stripes present, and they can be a pink or blue color. Brittany did not have this abnormality. Though I still find her circumstances striking, I don't personally believe that she died from heavy metal. I am not convinced that there isn't more to this story. I also feel very strongly about the fact that Simon contributed to her death. If he was in fact isolating her from the world and pressuring her to stay super thin, that also likely prevented her from seeking medical help when she started getting very ill. Being malnourished can wreak havoc on your immune system, and it played a role in her anemia for sure. This case is so complex. Even if he didn't feed her poison, his pressures and controlling behavior may have either directly or indirectly caused her death. If that is really what happened, I believe he deserves some culpability in her death. Unfortunately, he's 6 feet under. As for his own death, it's entirely possible that he just didn't take good care of himself, especially after Brittany died. He may not have been eating properly, he was known for staying awake all hours of the night, and also abusing drugs. He likely had a very compromised immune system, and he already had a lot of risk factors for illness. Or maybe, just maybe, dare I say, that it was poetic justice. Is it possible that Simon was unfairly painted in a poor light? Yes, to a certain degree, it's possible. It is possible that not everything spread about him is accurate. We all know how rumors and gossip can be, but we do know that he has a past behavior of conning people, and Brittany and Sharon were no different. Because after his death, that is when the truth was revealed about all of those jewelry pieces. Brittany's bank account had been largely drained, and Sharon tried to get these pieces appraised, only to learn that every single one was a fake. Simon did steal from Brittany's estate. He was deceitful about what he was doing. That doesn't necessarily mean that the rumors of his controlling behavior are true, but he did get Brittany fired from a film. There is mounting circumstantial evidence against him. With all of that, it is hard to believe that he was an innocent party. At the end of the day, this is like a Greek tragedy. Brittany was special. She had a gift, and she shared her beauty with the world. It is heartbreaking to know that the end of her life was marred with a reputation as a drug addict and lost soul. I really hope that people can learn to remember her for who she really was and not for the months leading up to her death.